Hey guys, this is just a quick recap on how to rig an FK arm. This is a very basic sort of rig, so if you're expecting to see sort of like anti-twist controls for the forearm, stuff like that, you're not going to get it with this video. This video is just really about setting up controls to make this FK joint system work as like an arm. Alright, so as you can see, I've got a basic sort of setup. So imagine there's a visible spine going down the middle of the joint chain. This would be the chest joint. We have a shoulder joint, we have a bicep joint, an elbow joint, and a wrist joint, along with a basic sort of hand setup. For this video, I'll just quickly go through the FK joint system here. I'll do another video shortly with the hand, how to make a very basic sort of hand rig. So for this, we're just going to use this joint chain here. So first things first, we've got to reorient these joints to follow along the joint chain. So we're going to select all our joints. We're going to go to skeleton. We're going to go to Orient Joint Options. Now, let's turn on our local axis visibility. As you can see, they're all sort of aligned with the world at the moment. You can keep it like this if you really wanted to, but it's not exactly recommended. By default, because I made this joint chain in one go, the x-axis along the arm at least is the primary axis, and for the chest, the primary axis at the moment is y. So we want to kind of keep this consistent along the entire joint chain. So to do that, let's go with y for this instance, because our primary joint axis for our spine, our invisible spine, is y. So we can change it from x to y, or push apply. Unfortunately, this one didn't move completely in the right direction. We can kind of like eyeball it so it does sort of follow along this sort of axis. There's a few ways to fix that, but let's just try this. We'll create a new locator. We're going to push our locator, then our elbow joint. We're going to go to transformation tools, match transformations, match all transformations, and then we're going to click on this locator, click on our end joint, and then click again. Instead of match all transforms, we're going to match the translation. It will keep the rotations from our elbow, and because this is the last joint in our joint chain, we can reorient this joint to this locator in the same fashion. So we're going to go click our joint, then our locator, then go to window, again go to modify, match all transforms, and now notice how the orientation matches our joint chain. Now we just have to freeze our transforms for that so it stays put, and there we go, a nice clean endpoint to our joints. We can delete that locator for now. Now that that's oriented, we can, oh shit, that last joint for instance is screwed up. Let's just make that align to world, turn off orient children, and push apply. Alright, cool. So that's how it should look. Alright, now we're going to have controls for our shoulder, our bicep, and our forearm, and finally a control setup for our wrist. So this is a pretty simple setup. All we got to do is make a bunch of controls, parent those controls to some locators, and then constrain our joints to those locators. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. First things first, let's make a bunch of locators to match our joints. So we need 1, 2, and 3, and 4. We're going to click the locator tool 4 times. We're going to call these control groups. So we're going to call the first one CTRL, GRP, shoulder. I'm going to call the next one bicep. Third one, forearm. Fifth, and the last one, wrist. Alright. Now, next thing we're going to do, we're going to make a bunch of control curves. So we're going to go with a simple circle for these ones. Click that 4 times. Let's have a look. Close that. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to call these controls. So control, CTRL, shoulder, CTRL, bicep, CTRL, forearm, and CTRL, wrist. And then we're going to parent our controls to our locators, like so. Parent, parent, and parent. Now if I expand those, this is how it should look. The controls are parented under the control group. So the reason why we're doing that is that when we align our locators to our joint chain, the locator will inherit the transformations of those joints, but our control itself will have 0 transforms on it. That's the great thing about this sort of setup. So you'll see now, if I click on this empty or this locator and click on our shoulder, I will go to modify, match transformations, match all transforms. You'll see that our locator will have all the necessary transforms to make this work, make this align with the joint, but our control won't. It will be zeroed out. So we just have to do that the same thing for every other joint. We're going to match our transforms for the bicep. We're going to match the transforms for the forearm, and then we're going to match the transforms for our wrist. Notice how, even though it has, the nice thing about this sort of setup is that it's also inherited the joint orientation of our joints. So now, if we were to turn on local rotation axis on these controls, it will match the joints. So if we go to object display, transform display, local rotation axis, notice how it looks exactly the same. Awesome. Isn't that nice and good? Isn't that awesome? Alright, cool. So, what do we do next? So obviously our controls aren't affecting anything at the moment, and the parenting of these locators aren't mimicking the hierarchy of our deformed joints. So we need to mimic our hierarchy, our FK hierarchy, with our control hierarchy. So we need to have this control group be the child of our control. So control group wrist is the child of control forearm, because we want this control to affect the child of that group. Yep. And that is the same up the joint chain. So control group forearm is the child of control, not control group, control bicep, parent. Control group bicep is the child of control shoulder, parent. So now, if we play with our controls, they mimic the FK hierarchy of our original deformed joints. See? Cool. Now, what we need to do now is constrain our joints to our controls. So there's a few ways of doing that, but the simplest and fastest way for us is simply to parent constrain or orient constrain our joints to our controls. So we click our control, we click our joint, go to constrain, option box parent constrain. We can have maintain offset turned off or on, but it doesn't really matter in this case because our controls are perfectly matched to our joints. But if they weren't, we'd have maintain offset turned on. So again, we'll select our control for our bicep, then we'll select our bicep joint, click apply. We'll select our control forearm, select our deform joint for our forearm, select apply. Select our wrist, control wrist, then select our control joint, our deform joint, push apply. And now we have a very simple FK arm rig with no transform offsets and full control over the arm. Nice and simple. And of course, we have a little issue here where our chest isn't affecting our joint chain down the line. The reason for that is because this joint is constrained to this control. So we need to play with our hierarchy a little bit to make this the child of our joint, our chest joint, not our shoulder joint. So to do that, we will select our shoulder joint and we'll unparent it from our chest. So there's no parent relationship yet there. So instead of making this joint the child of our chest, we're going to make this locator the child of our chest joint. Parent. So now, even though there's no bone there, it's still acting like there is one there. See what I mean? Very sort of clean and simple FK joint setup. And we have complete all our translates and scales and rotations are free of any transforms as well. And that's basically it for the rig. The only thing we need to do now is lock and hide our locator transform attributes, because we don't want to accidentally click those and cause everything to spaz out, because they still have overall control over our rig. So we're going to just simply lock and hide everything on those locators. So let's just click all our locators, select all our transform attributes, lock and hide. We don't want to freeze those transform attributes because they're actually influencing our children control joints. But now we can't manipulate those locators, but we can still use our controls as needed with the proper local rotations matching. So that's how you make a FK joint chain for controls. Thanks.